Supervisor Dr. Mohammad Ali Zulfagarian. So, okay. So this research is about, basically in this paper, we try to propose and examine a framework by which we try to explain like how the YouTube bloggers can influence their viewers and followers' compliance intention to follow a healthy diet. Okay? Drawing upon the parasocial interaction and social comparison theory, this research indicated the factors that impact consumers' compliance with health-related guidance and instructions. So basically what we are trying to do here is that based on the characteristics of the source characteristics, or in this case here's the characteristics of the blogger, how that really influences consumers' compliance intention. Because prior research, there's been many research in social media area like that was focusing on the consumers like health related aspects but what are the factors really impact people's compliance intention, there was very little research conducted on this, so we try to cover this gap in this research. Okay. Now the theoretical framework of this study is based on parasocial interaction and social comparison theory. Now parasocial interaction theory, it's being heavily used before, like to explain the relationship in between audience and the celebrities. It's sort of that imaginary or illusionary relationship that people establish with the celebrity, right? Like, although the celebrity doesn't know you, but you know the celebrity very well, like what he eats, what his likings and dislikings, right? So those kind of things. So this PSI relationship can be very influential. If it become very strong, the person can become a role model as well, right? That's why people, different brands often use the celebrities to promote different messages, right? So people listen to them. They have more influence on people. And again, social comparison theory, which describes like how individuals compare themselves with others in their behavioral decisions. And we also included like the three source characteristics here, which are credibility, physical attractiveness, and homophily as the antecedents of PSI. I'll say PSI, parasocial interaction, from now on. So these are my hypotheses. I didn't go into detail. The first hypothesis is like credibility of the blogger is positively associated with PSI. Homophily of the blogger is positively associated with PSI. Physical attractiveness of the blogger is positively associated with PSI. Then PSI with the blogger is positively associated with compliance intention. It will become more clear once I show you the model. Then the effect of PSI on compliance intention is mediated by consumer readiness. And the effect of PSI on compliance intention is stronger for high health conscious viewers in a PSI with the blogger related to the people who have lower health consciousness. Now, the methodology, in this study we designed a 2x2 experiment. Over there we manipulated two of the blogger characteristics, credibility and also homophily. We manipulated credibility with the text, like in the case of high credibility, we posted like that person has a PhD in health and he's do like fitness consulting and those kind of stuff. And in the case of low credibility, we said it like the person like do drama, or said it in that way so that it becomes very clear to that person doesn't really have much knowledge on health related. And by the way, let me tell you that we created some videos for the experimental purpose, and each video consists of the same script, and they talked about like 5 quick tips on how to lose weight. Okay? And we measured attractiveness and health consciousness in this study, and they manipulated the first two. And the sample consists of 165 college students with Mexican origin from a university in South Texas area. And all the constructs were measured using the existing scales, and as a tool we use like independent sample t-test and PLS SEO. Now the procedure, like since it's a 2x2 experiment, so there's like 4 sets of questions. Okay, it consists of one video and a text, followed by the same questions, which they scaled. The participants were randomly assigned to the sets. Okay, only Mexican students were chosen because we tried to capture the homophily effect accurately. The university from where we collected the participants, they mostly consist of students of Mexican origin. So we only, the way we control so that only Mexican students can take the survey, because we put filter questions there. The people who are apart from Mexican origin, they are not going to be able to take the survey. So 2 versions of the blogger bio we created, as I said before, like high and low credibility, and 2 female bloggers we recruited for the video. One was from Mexican origin to reflect high homophily, and another one is East Asian to reflect low homophily. Then reliability, validity, all the constructs, I mean the factor loadings were above 0.6, the Cronbach alpha above 0.7, CR, the composite reliability, those are above 0.8, and AV was above 0.8. So this reflects acceptable level of reliability and convergent validity as per the Barsnik and Friedel. And for the discriminant validity, we plotted the square root of each of the constructs, AVs, diagonally, and compared them with the interfactor correlations. And the rule is like when the AVs are higher than the interfactor correlations, that reflects discriminant validity. And that's how we measured it. Okay. Now the manipulation check. As I said, that we manipulated two of these factors: credibility, source characteristics, credibility and homophily. Okay. In a case of, you can see like there's high credibility and low credibility. So the purpose of doing this manipulation check is that like we expect that in case of high credibility, the people would rate them in such way so that our purpose gets fulfilled. So you can see that like in high credibility case, the mean is like 5.49, while in low it's 4.29. Here's the standard deviation, and the difference is significant. So the manipulation for the credibility is successful. And also in homophily, we see the same case, like mean is 4.50, and in low cases, it's 3.91. And this difference is also significant. So this basically indicates that our manipulation was successful, like people. Now, hypothesis testing. So our first two hypotheses was the influence of the relation in between credibility to PSI and homophily to PSI. So we as we manipulated the things, we tested them using the independent sample t-test. Okay. So in the credibility scenario, the difference was significant, and H1, the hypothesis 1 was supported. That means like when the credibility is higher, people tend to engage in parasocial interaction more as compared to when the credibility is lower. However, in the case of homophily, we didn't see the relationship. Then it basically means is that like based on the people's like ethnicity, because we based ethnicity-based comparison. We used one female from the Mexican origin and another one from East Asian. So depending on their race or ethnicity, it doesn't really matter in case of PSI. That's what we found here. Okay. And the rest of the hypotheses were tested using a PLS-ACM. Okay, so the hypothesis 3 was the positive relationship in between physical attractiveness and PSI, like whether physical attractiveness has a positive relation on PSI or not. And we find it, yes, there is a positive relationship, and it's also significant, so H3 supported. Hypothesis 4 was the relationship in between PSI and compliance intention. That means when people involve in PSI with a blogger, that means kind of like the person, or that when the person have that influence on his audience, whether people really want to comply or not, and we found support for that. So, and also the percentage of the variance explained, that means the R-square of the endogenous variables were quite substantial and statistically significant. We also included two control variables here, like since it's compliance intention, it can be influenced by many other factors. From the literature, we find like here is compliance intention, the perceived value, that means the cost benefit, whether you follow it or not, and perceived risk of non-compliance. These two very strong predictor of compliance intention. That's why we added them here as a control variable of compliance intention. So here's my model. You can see like the path from credibility to parasocial interaction, that's significant. Physical attractiveness, that's also significant, but we didn't find any significant relationship in case of homophily. The R-squared here is 0.347, it's like about 34%, and finally the compliance intensity explains around 0.745, which is about 74%. We also included a mediator here, which is the consumer readiness, and also a moderator, which is the health consciousness. I'm going to talk about them in the next slide. And here's the two control variables that we put: perceived value and perceived risk of non-compliance as control variable of compliance intention. And though, by the way, those relationships are also significant, those effects. All right, so the mediating role of consumer readiness. Let me show you the picture. Here's a mediator here. So as you can see, there is a mediation going on, like the path from parasocial interaction, consumer readiness, and consumer readiness to compliance intention. these are both significant. That means there's a mediation going on through this channel. And also the relationship from PSI to compliance intention is also significant. So basically what it indicates is that consumer readiness is working as a partial mediator here. Okay? There's not a full mediation, but there's a partial mediation. In case of full mediation, this relationship would have been insignificant. And then basically that's what I said here. So that was our hypothesis, like whether consumer readiness is working as a mediator or not. Yeah, so it's supported. And the moderating role of health consciousness. This is kind of interesting. We hypothesize that based on the peoples of health consciousness, PSI will have a stronger effect on compliance intention. That means when people are more health conscious, people will watch those videos more carefully, or probably they are going to tend to follow them. But we couldn't find any interaction effect here. You can see the interaction effect is not significant. So that basically means that we use the Hayes process macro model 1 to run the moderating role, the moderating test. We found that a lack of significant interaction effect here. So therefore, what it means is that PSI on compliance intention is not contingent upon consumers' level of health consciousness. So H6 is not supported. Now here's my research finding. It's like that means from the research, that's what I find. Like when a blogger is perceived to be more credible and physically attractive, viewers are more likely to engage in PSI with the blogger, and the level of perceived homophilia with the blogger has no significant impact on PSI development. As I said, like depending on whether the person is Asian, American, and that's what we found. Like there's not much difference based on that. So it can mean that people are more goal-oriented rather than the ethnicity of the person who is talking. Then the strong influence of PSI on compliance intention in weight loss, blogger viewer context. So that means PSI has a strong influence. Since our context was like weight loss context, like the videos were promoting how to lose weight. So yeah, in that case, PSI has a strong relationship with the compliance intention. And PSI can result in higher customer readiness. So, there's another thing, customer readiness. Customer readiness basically consists of three things: role clarity, ability, and motivation. It's kind of a process. Like when you have those three things, you can say like the customer readiness of the person is increasing. So when the role is clear, the person has the ability to do the thing, and he's also motivated, his chances of follow the things increases. So since PSI has the influence of consumer readiness, what we so PSI can result in higher consumer readiness and thus more motivation to follow a recommended health behavior. And PSI is not experienced differently for different level of health consciousness. As I said, like depending on people's level of health consciousness, we didn't find any significant or moderating effect. And the situational factors, these are basically the control variables. Perceived value of compliance and perceived risk of non-compliance can influence the compliance intention. And here's some managerial implications. First, ethnically related homophilia is less important in weight loss video context. And then while recruiting bloggers, their perceived credibility and attractiveness as per the audience must be considered, because those two we find is very strong. Then since PSI's influence on consumer readiness is, we found a relationship, marketers should assess the communication skills and the capability to motivate others of that blogger so that he can motivate other person, which can result in positive outcome. And individual characteristics, as we found here, like the health consciousness does not necessarily impact compliance intention on PSI. It's experienced, and consumer readiness is developed.